Shalom and welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim and Richman here together with Yitzchak Reuven today, the 9th day of the month of Shvat, 5779. That means it's also January 15th, 2019. And this week, the magnificent Parashat BeShalach. That's right, we are on the move in this week's Torah portion. And if we would have a favorite, I mean, Yitzchak and I don't like to talk about favorites, but this is such an incredible Torah portion. Everything in the world is in it. Every incredible manifestation of Hashem's sovereignty in this world was revealed to the children of Israel as they crossed the sea of reeds. And so many incredible Torah concepts in this week's Torah portion, in addition to the majestic, moving, unparalleled Song of the Sea, which was such a seminal prophetic experience for the entire nation. We also have the whole concept of the Manna, the secrets of livelihood, the Song of Miriam. The end of the Parasha ends with the attack of Amalek. There's so many key principles that we could spend a lifetime studying in this week's Torah portion. But first, I would like to mention here, as we sit in very cold, unseasonably cold, outrageously cold Jerusalem, very thankful to Hashem for the incredible amounts of life-giving water, of blessing that have fallen. In fact, December, I think, was the rainiest December in 30 years. And in general, this is considered to be a very wet winter. It's, I think, the wettest altogether so far in about 10 years.
For sure. It's had some very dry winters, suffering a drought for many years now.
It may snow tomorrow.
May snow.
Here in Jerusalem. And I say all this because as we are sitting here in this very, very rainy, cold, stormy winter, I must tell you that next week, before the next Temple Talk, that's why I have to tell you about it now, on Monday, 21st of January 2019, we will be observing the festival of Tu Bshvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat is what Tu Bshvat means, and that is a very, very special day. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit because if you are interested in marking the day in any way, observing it, learning a little bit about it, this would be the time, since it will be occurring before our next program, albeit right before our next program. So what is Tu Bshvat all about? It is a festival, I call it sometimes an unsung festival, because it is known in the diaspora. It is marked by Jewish communities, but it isn't really celebrated as much as it is in the land of Israel. It's a distinctly Israeli, meaning land of Israeli observance. It is called by our sages, this is the great sages of the Mishnah, it is called the Rosh Hashanah of trees. In other words, there are different periods of time over the year, different dates that mark certain processes, just like for human beings. The Rosh Hashanah, the new year, is the first day of Tishrei. That's the time of judgment. There's an idea that the Rosh Hashanah of trees is the 15th day of the month of Shvat. You may be wondering, what does that have to do with people? And I'm going to get to that. But while a lot of people look at Tu Bshvat, even here in the land of Israel, as a time for tree planting, it's a custom that people go out and plant new trees on the 15th day of Shvat. You should know that is a fairly new custom. It's really parallel to the advent of the modern movement of Zionism. It's not an ancient custom. The ancient custom of Tu B'Shvat is, first of all, the day has certain aspects of a minor festival, and that's reflected in our prayers. But it's really observed by partaking of the fruits of the land of Israel. And I don't mean just eating some dried apricots or dried figs. I mean the fruits that the land of Israel is praised for, the 7 species that are described in the book of Deuteronomy, which are
Rimon, pomegranate, Te'ena, fig, Tamar, date, Zayat, olive,
wheat,
Hita, Sora, barley,
Spelt.
spelt, and we're missing one, right? How many did we name?
I'm
I thought
counting.
I thought you were keeping track.
I left this up to you. In any event,
Wait.
why Tu Bshvat? Why Yitzchak is furrowing his eyebrows and counting on his fingers. I'm going to get back to this. Why the 15th day of the month of Shvat? Because there is an idea. First of all, there's an idea that we've been talking about.
I think we covered it.
Okay, Yitzchak, I'll tell you what it is. It is Eretz chita u'sa'ora v'gefen u'ta'ina v'rimon. Eretz zayit v'shemen u'dvash. This is the verse
We covered it.
which refers to the 7 species, and it is in this order. Actually, in the verse, it's wheat. Se'ora is barley. Gefen is grapes. Ta'ina
Figs.
is fig. Rimon is pomegranate. Olive. And dvash, but
Shemen is
dvash.
olive, and dvash, which is honey, but it's the honey of the
Right.
of the tamar of the date,
Exactly.
which is very popular today in Israel. I don't know about. I'm sure it's used in America and other countries. What do we call it? Silan. Silan. It's the date honey. It's like honey, but it comes from dates. Very similar.
Thank you, Yitzchak.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Now listen.
If you've never used Silan for your cooking, for different things, you want a honey substitute or just for sweetening, go to your store, ask for Silan.
So we've been talking for the whole month now so far about the fact that Shvat, the month of Shvat, is a time of renewal, rejuvenation, rebirth. It's
Water.
time of a fresh start, because there is a resonating of the life force that is pulsing through creation, which comes to a crescendo on Tu Bshvat. And this has to do with the fact that, according to the teaching of our sages, the majority of the year's rainfall has already fallen by the 15th day of Shvat, and on that day there is something that I think it really is described by the sages of the Jerusalem Talmud as a mystical process. There is something that's going on inside the natural world, a spark of energy, a stirring, and that the sages talk about the fact that the 15th day of the month of Shvat is called the Rosh Hashanah of trees, because it is a date by which certain aspects of the agricultural commandments that are observed in the land of Israel are measured in terms of the tithes, in terms of orla, which is the commandment that for the first 3 years the tree is allowed to grow before the fruit is picked, and some other things as well. So it's an important date in terms of the observance of the commandments that are dependent on the produce of the land of Israel, the agriculture of the land of Israel. But again, all this, what does this have to do with a person? So really, it all starts with a verse in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 20, verse 19, where the Torah is speaking about a war that's being waged within the land, and a city that's being sieged, an enemy city, and there's a prohibition that is given over there by Moshe Rabbeinu in chapter 20, verse 19, that when you besiege a city, you should not cut down fruit trees. You can only cut down trees that are non-fruit-bearing trees, but you can't cut down a fruit tree. Let me read the verse, please, if you don't mind.
Oh,
Just take me one moment to open it. Here we go. And so it reads as follows. When you besiege a city for many days to wage war against it and to seize it, do not destroy its trees by swinging an axe against them, for from it you will eat, and you shall not cut it down. Is the tree of the field a man, that it should enter siege before you? Only a tree that you know is not a food tree. It you may destroy and cut down, and build a bulwark against the city that makes war with you, until it is conquered. So that's where verse that I'm referring to. So the Torah here is actually posing this as a rhetorical question. I don't know if there's any other verse that we could point to, so famously at least, that is posing a rhetorical question. It's saying in Hebrew, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, right? So we're translating it in English. Is the tree of the field a man?
Mm-hmm.
But in the Torah itself, there is no cantillation, vowels, or intonation. So one expression, one word, one sentence can be read in a variety of ways. So there is a tradition that this is also read as a statement, not just as a rhetorical question, even though it makes sense in the context to read it. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, is the tree of the field a man, that you should wage war against it? But you could also read it, no, the tree of the field is a man.
Okay.
And so that is a popular concept. It is in contemporary society in Israel. It's this statement: Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, for the tree of the field is a man. For a man is a tree of the field. It's taught in kindergarten. It is. It's known by school children. It was made into a very popular song that's recorded by a number of Israeli artists. So I'm saying culturally, it's a famous expression, this Torah-based expression, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, for a man. The statement, not the rhetorical question, is the tree of the field. So what is it all about? So on a deep level, there is an idea that the Torah indeed is comparing a person to a tree. And so therefore, this day of Tu Bshvat, in which we know that there is a charge of energy that ripples through the natural world, affects a person as well. So what is a comparison between a person and a tree? So it's actually very, very deep when you think about it. Begin to think about it. What is it? How a tree has a very sturdy trunk, and its leaves branch out in every direction. And then you think about the fact that how amazing it is that this huge tree began with a little seed. And not only that, but the little seed, and this is the part that's really amazing, the little seed actually had to rot away completely until it was reduced to just sheer energy in order for this huge tree to burst forth into life. So the potential of the seed is amazing, and the little bit of investment in that seed, the watering of it, gives forth this beautiful tree bearing fruit. So obviously, on one level, the metaphor is referring to children, and the child is like the seed, and the adult is like the tree. And the way to establish a steadfast person full of good fruit and proper values is by investing in our children. Sages teach that the true offspring of the righteous are not only their children, but they are their good deeds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you go and you look at the tree, and you're standing at the tree, this huge tree, and you're looking for the roots. You don't see the roots. The roots are deep in the ground. And without those roots, the tree would be uprooted and would be tossed about, buffeted about in the wind. And that is the comparison with our emunah, with our faith in Hashem. That's like the roots, which gives a person his stability, just like the tree is stable in the ground. So also a person's stability comes from his roots.
And those roots grow and are nurtured and become deeper by the tree's leaves and branches facing heavenward. So they're drinking in that emunah, they're drinking in that faith in Hashem, and that's what's strengthening their roots and making a connection between heaven and earth, which again I think is man's task in this world, to make that bond.
And it's not enough to suffice either just on the faith, but a person has to be a person of action and has to grow and expand, and that's the idea of the branches reaching out also. with the commandments that we fulfill, with Hashem's will that we fulfill in this world. Maybe one of the most important comparisons also is the idea that there's different types of trees, just like this verse is telling us in Devarim. Is a person a fruit tree or a non-fruit bearing tree? And that basically is reflecting the idea, is a person living for himself, or is a person trying to create so that others can benefit from him as well? Is a person giving? Is a person self-centered, or is the person trying to give over to others, trying to benefit others? That's the idea of the fruit tree as well. So there's a lot here, and it's a very, very joyous day in the land of Israel. Look it up online. There's a lot of customs. There's a lot of special tefillot that we have. We've mentioned in the past also that it's a tradition that is the day that we ask Hashem that we should merit to have a beautiful etrog later in the year on Sukkot. And it's a very spiritually refreshing day.
Yes.
It marks a passage and a preparation for the coming awakening of the world to spring.
And often years, as well as this year, it comes very close to the reading of this week's Parashat, BeShalach, which is also symbolic of a tree coming into bloom. The people of Israel are suddenly they're come out from under the shadow of their slavery into the light of freedom, and the nation of Israel becomes the nation of Israel, begins to grow and to blossom. And there's, like you mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, Rabbi, so many themes of water which are in this parsha, beginning with the Yam Suf, with the Sea of Reeds, and later with the need to drink water, and need to have water, and is water sweet or is it bitter? Is there water from a rock? And, of course, we mentioned all the rain that we're getting now. We mentioned the fact that the month of Shvat, its mazal, its astrological sign, is the deli, the bucket of water. And all these are symbols of not only of life and nourishment and growth, but also of Torah itself, which is nimshal, which is compared to water, because it is life-giving and necessary for all.
Absolutely true that we always read Parashat BeShalach in the immediate vicinity of Tu Bshvat, and there's a lot of water in this week's Torah portion. It's one of the ideas that I hope to explore in our video lesson this week. And yes, there is also definitely a strong connection between the themes of Tu Bshvat and Parashat BeShalach. And the parsha is so outrageously amazing. Everything that's going on.
It reminds me, every year when Parashat Bereshit, the first Parashat in Genesis, creation of the world, we always say there's just so much to talk about. You can't even, there's more than you could possibly cover in a lifetime, and yet you try to take something out and learn something each year from it while you're focused on it that week. And there's just so much in this Parsha. There's so many different events, so many different themes, so many different angles that you can explore. It's endless.
First of all, it was the apex of a prophetic experience, and the difference between the experience of the splitting of the sea and the prophecy of the greatest prophets that are mentioned in the Tanakh. There's a few differences. First of all, our sages tell us that even Ezekiel and Isaiah, they saw what they saw as if it was through a mirror, but the experience of the perception of Hashem's kingdom and Hashem's oneness that was experienced at the splitting of the sea was direct. It was direct, and not only that, the main difference is that it wasn't experienced only by professional prophets, by experienced prophets. It was something that was so on such a soul level that the Talmud tells us that it was experienced by ordinary maids, by people that were the simplest people, and not only that, but that it was that this tremendous bolt of understanding of the depth of true knowledge and experience, and the level of joy that was felt, the understanding of Hashem's total sovereignty in the world. It was even felt by the unborn, by the unborn children in their mother's wombs. It was like so totally comprehensive. It transcended any sort of ordinary understanding. It was like absolutely the most profound experience, and truly the source of eternal joy, like this awakening to the reality of what Hashem really is. It's like everything that they experienced in Egypt, all that suffering and all that hardship and travail, it wasn't even reality. This is the real reality. In fact, there's an idea that we've shared in the past in some of our lessons over the years, that on one level, one of the understandings is that the source of the tremendous joy that was felt at the time of the splitting of the sea is that they realized that this whole thing that's going on all around us now with Hashem splitting the sea is actually just a metaphor to the eventual ultimate resurrection of the dead. This is like a foreshadowing, like a little taste of what's going to happen when Hashem brings everyone back. It's like the whole thing is like a birth canal into a new level of reality, like walking through this tunnel of a higher level of perception of what Hashem's relationship really is with us. And it's this week. It's this week, and this Shabbat is called the Sabbath of Song, and it is a particularly joyous time because we read this beautiful Torah portion.
Yes, indeed.
And there's the music already. Is that a whole half?
Sabbath of Song. Here's the
We're
music.
talking that long?
Yeah. What's to talk about?
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 9th day of the month of Shvat 5779, the 15th of January 2019. This coming Shabbat, Parashat BeShalach, crossing of the Sea of Reeds, the Exodus from Egypt, the Manna, so many things. And there's a common theme, Rabbi, which we already touched upon, and that is the theme of the tree, the theme of having your feet planted firmly on the ground while reaching up toward heaven, the theme which is really the raison d'etre of the nation of Israel, why God brought this nation out of Egypt, so that we can connect heaven and earth. And these are what the commandments are all about. And in case Israel, in their infant state of spiritual maturity, which is how they left Egypt, performed the Passover offering, but didn't quite get its total significance, while at the Sea of Reeds, they're told basically to set things in motion. You need to move forward. You need to step into the sea in order to precipitate, pun on the word, precipitate the miracle that God is about to perform for you, meaning that man has this tremendous responsibility for bringing God's light into the world and for making the world an inhabitable place for God's presence and for us. And this earth-heaven connection. Even, as he says to Moshe, you're standing on the ground, raise up your mateh, raise up your staff, reach heavenward and set things in motion. And again, we have that again when it came to, the problem with the water. Everything, man has to take the initiative and make it happen. And finally, in the battle against Amalek, when the whole battle was determined by whether Moshe's hands were held upward toward heaven and imbuing the people with faith in Hashem, then they're winning the battle. When his hands dropped, then they were losing the battle. And that heaven-earth connection.
The sages even quip, rhetorically on that point. They say, and did Moshe's hands win or lose the battle? It wasn't about his hands. It was about the tremendous reminder of the fact that this is all,
that there's a connection between heaven and
that's
earth.
The whole idea of the Song of the Sea and the whole idea of leaving Egypt. And it boils down to it in our time as well. Like this is the existential dilemma that man faces, as personified by the machinations that the nation of Israel goes through. But it's a human condition, which is: are we here randomly? Are we here on our own? Are we here all alone?
Or, as the children of Israel said in this week's Parashat, is God in our midst or not?
Exactly,
and that
is such a powerful idea, and it is all the difference in the world. It's like we're reading here in chapter 14, where they came to the sea, and then they look behind and they see that the Paro is coming back.
Don't look good.
And people are divided into different groups, and we read, they said to Moshe, "Were there no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness?" And this is after seeing everything that they saw in Egypt, and after living through the incredible differentiation between the Israelites and the Egyptians with the plagues. And is this that you have done to us to take us out of Egypt? And so the sages talk about how they were very divided, and there was one group that said, let's just go back to Egypt. There was one group that said, let's fight them. There was a group that said, let's just throw ourselves into the sea and just kill ourselves. To me, this whole thing is reminiscent of our whole situation today. The question is, do we think that we can do this on our own? Do we think that we are ourselves like the dominion and that it's all about us? We're totally in the center of everything and there's nothing else that matters? Or is it about the ratzon of Hashem for us, His will, His desire, His plan for us? We're living through now another electoral season here in Israel, and that's never easy. It's a very, very difficult process, the election season. And
basically brings up those same questions.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we had
it's
at
like,
the Sea of Reeds.
It's like, for me as an Israeli citizen with the vote, that's what I'm looking for here. It's who is, if anyone, going to represent the idea that it's all about Hashem's will for us and our job, our destiny, our purpose in this world and what are we all about anyway? It's not all that different than it was at that moment walking through the sea. To define the experience of what it was for the entire nation of Israel to walk through the sea that night, and if I had to define it in one sentence, I would say they were able through that experience to reveal Hashem's presence in the world, to reveal Hashem's sovereignty in the world. Mm-hmm. And it was a reality bending experience, because we are tending to define reality according to our very limited expectations. And Hashem, throughout the whole experience of what happened in Egypt, especially that night, was saying, no, I'll define what reality is. And it's limitless. And we limit ourselves, but with our own very, very limited expectations of doubts of what our potential really is. And when it comes to, again, it's a far cry from what it should be, but anyone that should represent the will of the people should be connected. Like you say, it's all about a connection. Should be about bringing Hashem's presence into our lives and enabling our presence here in this land through every vehicle that we have available to us, including the vehicle of the state, and especially the vehicle of the state, about it being a manifestation of Hashem's kingdom in the world. That's the goal for the state of Israel.
And the opposite of that, the contra to that, is Amalek, who implants doubt and minimizes man's significance and man's ability to make the world available for God's presence. That's the whole Amalek problem, conundrum that closes at the close of the Parsha this week.
They come and they instill doubt. Maybe you're not really good enough. It's all about suffix. It's all about doubt. It's all about feeling that we can't really do it.
Once there's a netek, once there's a disconnect between our consciousness and God, then all the doubts in the world come into play. We don't even know who we are anymore. We don't even know physically what we are anymore. Then guess what? That leads to many of the problems and dilemmas and illnesses of today's society. Just so much doubt about who we are as human beings anymore. And that's because of this Amalek-type presence that is eating away at man's connection with God, with the reality that is the world.
This is really interesting where you're going with this, because we all know that Amalek, Gematria, has the Hebrew numerical value of the word safek, which means doubt, and that on a deep level, our teachers inform us that the goal of Amalek in its attack against Israel is to instill doubt in our hearts. So, are you saying that gender disorientation is a manifestation of Amalekite doubt? Because you said, I know that's what you have in mind, because we were talking about that, you and I, earlier privately, and you were talking about the idea of, because you mentioned now we don't even know physically what we are.
Right. Yeah, I think that, either God is in charge of our reality and our creator.
And our reality
and we're created
is a
in God's
reflection
image,
right.
Or not. And if not, then there's no rhyme or reason for anything that I am. And therefore...
So there's this thing today, right? It's called gender assignment. Gender assignment is a person who actually identifies with the gender that they were born with.
Right, with their biological gender, or with the one that they were
declared,
right? That the midwife declared. Oh,
right. Let's say the doctor says
girl.
The definition of gender assignment is. Let's say the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl, and you actually are not filled with ambiguity. That might be a disorder that you don't feel it's ambiguous. If you're not filled with ambiguity and you actually identify with that, so then you're considered to be with your assigned gender. And then there's another word, the cis, right? CIS, man or woman, is a person who agrees with that. Now, the midwives that we learned about in Parashat Shmot, in the book of
they were gender assigners.
Exodus, they were gender assigners because they had to look out for the boys and the girls. But I think all of that, which is so rampant today, and it's so, to me, like the beginning of the end. Absolutely, the beginning of the end of creation, just like in the time of the flood. That the mentality is either like we are so in the center of our reality that we can just determine. So what about the facts? Don't confuse me with the facts. Don't confuse me with physically who I actually am. I want to be something else.
But
that so much precludes Hashem from life and from the world. It's like we become gods, and we worship this idolatry of our own absolute unraveling.
Our realities become totally fluid. We are what we decide we want to be, disconnected from any other reality.
Maybe it's a manifestation or a result of the fact that everything today is so virtual and so totally imagined and out of context. And
disconnected from the world.
People's connections with
from
reality
the physical
is
world.
So tenuous.
even, society has become, listen, man has become so developed that where our mere presence is threatening, the rest of the environment in the world.
That's what we talked about.
Anyway.
So one of the things that our sages mentioned regarding the experience of the splitting of the sea and that incredible walk that the nation took, and this level of emunah on such a deep level, this revelation of Hashem's sovereignty, and it all just being a bridge to the future, and that Hashem's will is so totally comprehensive, and that's all there is. And that reality is not at all what we see it. So that there'll actually, even life itself, there'll actually be a resurrection. So the sages teach that even the unborn in the mother's wombs, they also had this experience, and they also sang the song. They also sang the song completely. And then, one of my favorite teachings that our sages mentioned, that I've spoken about this also, that, they're going through this corridor the whole night. It stayed open for them, and they didn't bring along food for the way. When you take kids on a trip, you have to have a lot of stuff with you, like bags of potato chips and bamba, bisli, all sorts of things, right? They didn't have anything. So the Midrash says that the mothers reached into the walls of water and pulled out fruit and fed their children. And of course this is a mashal, a parable, a metaphor. And of course this is an example of how important it is to have the proper tools to understand the deep messages that our sages are giving us in this poetic license, in the vehicle of Midrash, because it is poetry and it's not literal. And basically what they're saying with a statement like that the mothers reached into the water and pulled fruit out and fed their children, is that the experience that they went through that night was living faith, and they're feeding their children, they're nurturing the mothers of Israel, the righteous women of Israel were nurturing their children with this faith. Mm-hmm. That was like the food that they ate. But my point is that is the whole thing. That's the definition, the experience of realizing that there's a Hashem in the world, and that everything is about His revelation to us of His presence in this world. So when you have it that way, and that's your nourishment, and you see it all around you, then you also accept your own gender, because it's not about me,
who you are.
But when it's only about me, then I can't even define myself, because I guess I could be whatever I dream of being, for whatever reason I would want to be that.
And that reaching into the walls of water and pulling out fruit and nourishment is a prelude to what follows after they've crossed the Sea of Reeds, when the people are physically hungry and they complain to Moshe, well, give us food. And then God introduces this amazing thing called manna, which again is manna from heaven, found on earth, found on the earth's surface. So again, it's this symbol of the connection between heaven and earth, and the Israelites are instructed how to deal with this. This is your nourishment, this nourishment that comes straight from heaven, but there's a protocol here, and you need to express your faith and your connection with Hashem by following the protocol. If you follow the protocol, you will have food and nourishment for yourselves every day, including Shabbat, and this is the introduction of Shabbat to the children of Israel. And if you don't follow the protocol, then it's going to rot away and turn into worms, and you'll have gained nothing. And again, this is teaching faith in Hashem through our basic physical needs, and making the connection all encompassing. It's not there's no break between our physical selves and our spiritual selves here. It's all one and the same. And I think that is what Torah is always trying to teach us, and that's what the commandments, the mitzvot, are always trying to teach us. Not a set of rules that you need to abide by in order to make somebody else happy. You abide by these rules because they are life itself. They are the manifestation. They are the expression of our connection with Hashem.
That's such an important point, because it's not about this restrictive, dry, overbearing, cumbersome system. You have to abide by these rules. it's a love relationship, and like Hashem is like embracing his people and saying that this is what I have for you.
Yeah.
This is our life together now. This is like it's a total expression of love. So everything is about to change for us now, and from this point on, the goal is going to become very, very specific. The goal is going to be the Mikdash, the temple, having Hashem's presence with us all the time, and this becomes like the whole Torah now from this point. And the first indication of it now is really in the Song of the Sea, where we read here, "You shall bring them and implant them on the mount of your heritage, the foundation of your dwelling place that you, Hashem, have made, the sanctuary, Hashem, that your hands established." This is a reference to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple. And commenting on this, the sages of the Midrash state that this is indicative of the fact that the whole reason Hashem took the people out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt in the first place, is to bring them into the land of Israel and to build the temple, which of course was originally fulfilled through the traveling form of the tabernacle.
For the purpose of manifesting God's presence on earth in a tangible way that you could relate to as a nation. Not just a spiritual concept. My body's my temple. No, this is a physical manifestation, and to make it an unmistakable connection, unmistakable presence. And again, the concept of, you mentioned before that on Tu Bshvat we plant trees. It's a modern tradition, and the concept here is that it says that we will be planted in the land of Israel, and the nourishment of our evolution will be in the building of the Holy Temple.
So this is the generation that we're now going to be learning about for quite a while.
For the duration, yeah.
The generation of the desert, which was a remarkable, incredibly holy group of people that made mistakes.
Not unlike our generation.
But the manna was a manifestation of their incredible relationship with Hashem. And to this day, the whole concept of livelihood and the challenges of making a living, and how everything really comes from Hashem's hand, and how everything really is a divine heavenly blessing, is all understood from the particulars of how Hashem fed the people of Israel the manna.
Yes, we tend to think of making a livelihood as something that's disconnected and distinct from our spiritual world. You have to get a job. I do what I have to do. I bring the money home, pays for food, etc., etc. But Torah is teaching us that there is a much deeper connection between our livelihood and God, and that connection is what makes it happen, what makes it possible.
So at the end of the Torah portion of BeShalach, we read, Amalek came and battled Israel in Rephidim. Moshe said to Joshua, "Choose people for us and go do battle with Amalek tomorrow. I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." And this, like we said, on a level of deeper meaning, is the challenge that we face all the time in terms of, are we serious about our relationship with Hashem? Do we really think that we could really do it? We could really bring that presence into our lives? That we could really go with it all the time? And Amalek comes, it's a force from within and without that has us question deeply our relationship with Hashem. Is it real?
Is it real? That's the question. Is it real? Is God in our midst or not? And is Amalek going to make some kind of a wall between us and Hashem? And I think the response of Moshe to build an altar at the conclusion of this battle is an amazing gesture, because an altar, again, is one of those things that connects heaven and earth. An altar is made of earth, it sits on the earth, and its offerings, create that reach nichoach, that sweet savory that appeals to God's ratzon, to God's will, and makes this earth, heaven
and the aroma
connection.
itself is our willingness to subjugate ourselves to Hashem.
So it's the
Hashem's
perfect
will.
response to the challenge of Amalek. And personally, I feel that that response is just as appropriate today as it was then. Of course, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the upcoming chapters and books of this odyssey of the generation of the desert. And, whoa, perfect timing, Rabbi, because I hear the music. I wish everybody a very, very happy Tu Bshvat next Sunday night, Monday. Eat some fruits of the land of Israel. And thanks for being with us today on Temple Talk.